That evening, I made up my mind. It was time to put an end to the uncertainty. Not because I felt ready, but because I could no longer stand the deception. It had all begun with subtle shifts, little things that seemed unimportant at first. My wife, Emily, started working late, even though she had always been predictably home on time. Out of nowhere, she had new friends I had never heard of, and suddenly, they became the center of her world. But the most unsettling change was in her eyes. They no longer held warmth. Instead, there was a distance, a cold detachment I couldn't ignore. Whenever I asked about her day, her responses were vague, hurried, as if she was eager to move on. And then there was her phone. She guarded it fiercely, always keeping it face down, clutching it as though it held something too valuable to share. I didn't need to be a detective to know something was wrong. At first, I tried convincing myself it was just my imagination, that I was overanalyzing things, letting paranoia get the best of me. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the nagging feeling refused to fade. Every smile she gave me felt rehearsed, every kiss devoid of real affection. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but deep down, I was terrified of what I might discover. Then came that Friday night, the night everything unraveled. Emily casually mentioned she was heading out to dinner with friends. Her tone was light, almost practiced, and when she kissed me goodbye, she avoided meeting my eyes. The moment the door shut behind her, I knew something was off. I waited for a while before pulling up the tracking app on my phone, the one we had installed years ago for safety reasons. My finger hesitated above the screen, as if pressing it would force me to face a truth I wasn't ready for. But when I finally did, my heart plummeted. She wasn't at the restaurant she had named. Instead, the app showed her location across town, at a bar known for its dimly lit atmosphere and secluded booths. My mind spiraled into chaos. Who was she meeting? Was it just one person? My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, that small red dot mocking me with its betrayal. I had every reason to get in my car and drive there, to catch her in the act, to demand answers face to face. But instead, I chose a different approach, one she would never forget. With steady hands, I walked to our bedroom and pulled open the drawer where I kept her engagement ring. The same ring that had once symbolized love, commitment, and trust. Now, it felt like nothing more than a cruel reminder of what we had lost. I placed it inside a small box and attached a simple note. I hope he's worth it. Without hesitation, I called a courier service. I gave them the address of the bar and instructed them to deliver the package directly to Emily. The person on the line didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any explanations. When the call ended, a surge of adrenaline coursed through me. I wasn't sure if I felt anger, heartbreak, or just an eerie sense of calm. All I knew was that now all I could do was wait. As I sat in the silence of our home, the seconds dragged into minutes, the minutes into what felt like an eternity. My thoughts raced with endless possibilities. Would she open the box in front of him? Would she try to deny it? Would she even come home? There was no telling what would happen next. But one thing was certain, the truth was no longer in my hands. The emptiness of the house felt suffocating. Every small creak, every car passing by outside, made my pulse quicken. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for some kind of response. Then, finally, a message appeared on the screen. What is this? Why would you do this? Call me. Her words were frantic, desperate, an attempt to regain control of the situation. I didn't respond. Instead, I simply stared at the screen, my hands unsteady. I could picture her in that bar, her supposed lover at her side, as she opened the box and read my note. I could almost hear the sharp breath she would take, see the way her expression changed: shock, guilt, maybe even anger. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an incoming call. Her name glowed on the screen. For a brief moment, I considered answering, letting her explain, hearing whatever excuse she had prepared. But something inside me refused. Instead, I let it ring until it went silent. I knew she would be livid, confused, maybe even scared. But it no longer mattered to me. The weight of suspicion that had been crushing me for weeks was gone. The sleepless nights, the endless second-guessing, it had all led to this moment. There was no turning back. Then, another call came through. But this time it wasn't Emily. The number was unfamiliar. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Is this Jason?" a man's voice asked, calm yet laced with something smug. "Who's asking?" I shot back, sharper than I intended. "This is Mark," he said, his tone unwavering. "I believe you sent something to Emily tonight. Let's talk about this like adults." Mark. So this was the man she had been sneaking around with. Hearing his voice ignited a deep anger within me, but I forced myself to remain composed. Keeping my tone cold and detached, I said, "There's nothing left for us to discuss. You made your choices, now live with the consequences." His response was a low, condescending chuckle that sent an unpleasant shiver down my spine. "Do you really think sending a little box changes anything? Emily and I are happy. You're just—" I didn't let him finish. Without hesitation, I ended the call, refusing to give him the satisfaction of getting under my skin. But the night was far from over. Moments later, the sharp screech of tires outside broke the silence. I moved toward the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see Emily's car pulling into the driveway. She stepped out forcefully, slamming the door behind her, and stormed toward the house with determined strides. When the front door swung open, she stood there, her face flushed, eyes blazing with fury. In her hand was the small box, the engagement ring inside catching the dim glow of the hallway light. Her voice, laced with both anger and desperation, trembled as she demanded, "What is this supposed to mean?" I remained silent, letting her question linger between us. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to face her. Keeping my tone calm yet firm, I finally responded, "You tell me. What does that ring mean to you now? What does our marriage mean to you?" For a brief moment, something in her expression shifted, anger giving way to uncertainty, even panic. But she quickly masked it with defensiveness. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "Mark is just a friend. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I took a step closer, my voice steady. "Am I? Because I don't think friends meet in bars and keep it a secret from their spouses. I don't think friends laugh behind their husband's back." Her face paled. For a second, it looked as if she might break down, but instead, she lashed out. "You're acting like a paranoid fool, spying on me, humiliating me in public with this message. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" A sudden surge of anger rose in me, my voice rising for the first time. "Good. Now you know exactly how I felt every single time you lied to me. Every time you looked me in the eyes and pretended everything was fine." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, searching for a response, one that could undo what had already unraveled. But no words could fix this. And then, in a moment that would stay with me forever, she delivered the final blow. "You're pathetic, Jason," she said with quiet disdain. "I deserve better than this. Better than you." Her words cut deep, sharper than any blade. But instead of breaking me, they solidified what I already knew. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself and spoke with finality. "Then go. Pack your things and leave. Because after tonight, you'll never have to settle for me again." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her frozen in stunned silence. But I knew this wasn't the end. What came next would take everything I believed about betrayal and push it beyond anything I had imagined. Upstairs, I closed the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, allowing myself a moment to process everything. The whirlwind of emotions threatened to consume me, yet somewhere in the chaos there was clarity. Her words, harsh, unforgiving, had given me the last push I needed. This was beyond repair. There was no going back. I moved toward the nightstand and grabbed my laptop. If she wanted to call me pathetic, I would show her just how meticulous and deliberate I could be. Over the past few weeks, as suspicions about Emily had grown, I had quietly begun collecting evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, inconsistencies in her schedule, all signs pointed in one direction. But I had needed undeniable proof. Now it was time to put it all together. I started with her phone records. A single unknown number appeared over and over, dozens of calls, countless messages, all at odd hours. It had to be him. Mark. Next, I opened her email account, which she had carelessly left logged in on our shared laptop. My hands trembled as I scanned through her inbox, looking for confirmation of what I already knew deep down. And then, I found it. An email from him, sent just 2 days ago. The subject line read, "Can't wait to see you Friday night." My stomach twisted as I clicked it open. The message was casual, filled with inside jokes, flirty comments, and unmistakable intimacy between them. There was even a picture attached. The two of them sitting together at the very same bar she had been at tonight. Her smile in that photo was radiant, a kind of joy I hadn't seen on her face in months. But the final line of his email was what shattered any last shred of doubt. Soon, we won't have to hide anymore. Just tell him and get it over with. I love you. My vision blurred as I stared at those words. I had once believed love was unbreakable, something that could withstand any storm. But now, faced with the undeniable truth of her betrayal, I understood just how fragile it really was. A sudden, sharp knock on the bedroom door snapped me out of my thoughts. Jason, open the door. Emily's voice came from the other side, strained and urgent. We need to talk. Talk? After everything I had just uncovered? I exhaled deeply, trying to steel myself before I reached for the handle. When I opened the door, she stood before me, her face flushed, her eyes swollen and red, the telltale signs of tears. But the moment her gaze fell on the laptop in my hands, something in her expression shifted. Panic flickered across her features. What are you doing? She asked, her voice tight with fear. Looking for answers, I responded flatly. And I found them. Her eyes widened in shock. You went through my emails? She accused, disbelief dripping from her tone. That's an invasion of my privacy. Privacy? I shot back, my voice rising. You're talking about privacy when you've been sneaking around with him for months? When you've been lying to me every single day? She instinctively stepped back, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. For once, she had nothing. No excuse, no carefully crafted lie to twist the situation in her favor. I never meant for this to happen. She finally whispered, barely audible. It just did. I let out a bitter laugh. That's what you're going with? That it just happened? Do you really expect me to believe you accidentally ended up in his arms? In his bed? Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. You called me pathetic? I continued, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. Maybe I was. Maybe I let you walk all over me for too long. But not anymore. I extended the laptop toward her, the damning email still glaring on the screen. She hesitated before looking at it, her face crumpling as she read the undeniable proof of her betrayal. Jason, please, she begged, her voice shaking. We can work through this. I'll end things with him, I swear. Just, let's talk. End things with him? I scoffed, my laugh hollow and devoid of humor. Emily, it's already over. Not just with him. With us. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. But I didn't comfort her. Her regret, her tears, they had come far too late. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. But this time, it wasn't just a text. It was a video. A sense of dread settled in my chest as I hesitated before opening it. The screen filled with grainy footage of Emily and Mark at a bar. But they weren't alone. Another man was there, sitting nearby, discreetly recording them. The video ended, and a message appeared across the screen. There's more you need to see. Call me. I stared at my phone, my pulse pounding. Who had sent this? And why? Emily's sobs faded into the background as my thoughts raced. There was someone else involved, someone who had been watching. Someone who knew everything and now wanted to tell me. I read the message again. Call me. After a moment of hesitation, I tapped the number. My hands felt unsteady as the phone rang. On the third ring, a deep, composed voice answered. Jason, I'm glad you called. His tone was calm, almost professional. Who is this? I demanded. And how do you know about Emily? Let's just say I've been watching for a while, he replied, his words cryptic. You deserve to know the full truth. Watching, I repeated, my suspicion flaring. What does that mean? Have you been stalking her? It's not what you think, he quickly reassured me. I'm a private investigator. Someone hired me to track Mark, and in the process, Emily got caught in the middle. Private investigator? My stomach twisted. Who hired you? And why? That's confidential, he said firmly. But I can tell you this, Mark isn't who he pretends to be. He's dangerous, Jason. And Emily? She's in deeper than she realizes. I frowned, struggling to connect the dots. Mark? Dangerous? The arrogant guy who had the nerve to call me earlier didn't exactly seem like a threat. What do you mean, dangerous? I asked warily. The investigator didn't hesitate. Mark has a history, a long one. He's a con artist, a professional. He specifically targets married women, gains their trust, isolates them, and then drains them of everything. Your wife isn't his first victim, and she won't be his last. His words landed like a punch to my gut. Emily hadn't just been unfaithful. She had been played. Why are you telling me this? I asked, still struggling to process it all. Because I know how this ends, he said grimly. Mark will take everything from her, her money, her reputation, even her safety. If you still care about her, you need to do something before it's too late. I let out a humorless laugh. Care about her? She's been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back, and now you expect me to step in and save her. I understand, the investigator said, his voice softening slightly. You have every right to be furious, and I won't argue with that. But this isn't just about Emily, it's about you as well. Mark is meticulous. If he senses that you're onto him, he won't hesitate to strike back. Your finances, your reputation, everything you've built will be at risk. As those words settled in, the room seemed to shift around me. This wasn't just an affair. It was something far more sinister, something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. What do you want me to do? I asked at last, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I'm sending you everything I have on Mark, the investigator replied. Photos, financial statements, testimonies from his past victims. It's all there. Do what you must, but under no circumstances should you confront him directly. He's unpredictable and dangerous when backed into a corner. Before I could respond, the call ended abruptly. A second later, my phone vibrated with a new message, a link to a secure folder. My fingers trembled as I tapped on it. The folder opened, revealing a flood of evidence. Documents, photographs, videos, each more incriminating than the last. There were images of Mark with different women, financial records proving he was funneling money into offshore accounts, and even police reports from previous victims. But one particular photo made my breath hitch. It showed Emily and Mark outside the bar she had visited earlier that night. They were laughing, holding hands, appearing every bit the picture of a happy couple. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. The deeper I went, the more my anger shifted. This wasn't just about betrayal. Mark wasn't some ordinary man Emily had fallen for, he was a predator, and she was just another one of his victims. As much as I despised what she had done, I couldn't ignore the reality. She was in danger. And if the investigator was right, so was I. Taking a deep breath, I shut the folder, trying to regain control of my thoughts. This had escalated far beyond my marriage. It had become a matter of survival. Downstairs, Emily's sobs had quieted, replaced by the soft sound of her movements. Steeling myself, I stepped out of the bedroom and found her pacing in the living room. When our eyes met, hers were swollen from crying, yet there was a flicker of defiance in them. Jason, we need to talk, she said, her voice unsteady. I held up my phone, my expression hard. Oh, we're going to talk. But first, you need to see this. I handed her the device, the folder still open. She hesitated before taking it, her gaze flickering over the screen. As she scrolled through the files, the color drained from her face. Where did you get this? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Does it matter? I countered. What matters is that the man you've been sneaking around with is a fraud. He's been using you, Emily, just like he's used every other woman before you. She sank onto the couch, her hands unsteady as she held the phone. I didn't know, she stammered. I thought he actually cared about me. Cared about you? My voice rose, anger cutting through my words. Emily, he's been playing you from the start. And now, thanks to you, he's coming after me too. Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook so easily. You need to tell me everything, I demanded. How you met him, what he's told you, every detail. If we're going to stop this guy, I need to know exactly what we're up against. She gave a small nod, her shoulders slumping. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had married. There was something in her expression, regret, perhaps, but this wasn't over. Not even close. The real storm was only beginning, and neither of us knew just how much damage it would leave behind. Emily sat clutching my phone, her grip so tight it looked as though she feared it would shatter. Her pale face, trembling lips, and wide eyes told me everything I needed to know. She was terrified. Not just guilty anymore, but truly afraid. At last, she understood the severity of what she had gotten herself into. Talk, I said, keeping my voice even. From the beginning. How did this happen? She swallowed hard, barely managing to speak. I met him at a work event. He was charming, confident. He listened to me, Jason. He made me feel important. A bitter laugh escaped me. So that was all it took? A few flattering words from a stranger, and suddenly everything we built meant nothing? It wasn't like that, she protested, tears spilling down her cheeks. At first, it was innocent. He knew exactly what to say, made me feel like I mattered. And then things escalated. I narrowed my eyes. Escalated how? She hesitated, staring at the floor. We started meeting up after work. Just for drinks at first. But then other places. I never meant for it to go this far, Jason. I swear. I shook my head in disbelief. You never meant for it to go this far? Emily, you were planning to leave me for him. Don't act like this just happened. Her eyes met mine, filled with desperation. I didn't know who he really was. I thought he loved me. You thought he loved you? I repeated, my voice sharp with disbelief. Emily, he's a con artist. A professional liar. He's done this to countless women before you. And now, because of you, we're both caught in his trap. She exhaled shakily, her whole body sagging under the weight of my words. What do we do now? Emily's voice wavered as she spoke. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. We? There is no we, Emily. You made this mess and now you have to deal with it. She recoiled at my words, but I felt nothing. Whatever sympathy I once had for her had long since dried up. Still, I couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. Mark was dangerous. Not just to her, but to me as well. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to focus. This is what's going to happen, I said, my tone firm. You're going to cut all ties with him. No calls, no messages, nothing. Do you understand? She gave a shaky nod, her hands trembling at her sides. And you're going to tell me everything, I continued. Every word he said to you. Every promise, every deception, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she began speaking, her voice unsteady but resolute. He told me he wanted us to start over, to build a new life together. He promised to handle everything, but only if I was completely committed. He even asked me to move some of our savings into an account he set up. I stiffened. Did you do it? Her head shook quickly. No. I was going to, but something inside me told me to stop. I knew it was wrong. Jason, I swear I never went through with it. A small flicker of relief passed through me. At least she hadn't handed over our money. Not yet. Did he say anything else? Anything about me? I asked cautiously. Emily hesitated before nodding, her face growing even paler. He said you'd never see it coming. That if you tried to stand in his way, he'd handle it. My jaw clenched. Handle it. My voice was dangerously low. Was that a threat? I don't know, she whispered, shaking her head. Maybe. He never came right out and said it, but the way he talked about you. Jason, it scared me. My fists tightened as anger surged through me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. Mark wasn't just some manipulative con artist, he was a predator. And he had made the mistake of underestimating me. I took a slow breath, my resolve hardening. Fine, I said, my voice cold and deliberate. If he wants a fight, he's going to get one. But we're doing this on my terms. Emily stared at me, her eyes filled with fear. What are you going to do? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Deep down, I already knew exactly what my next move would be. The next morning, I woke with a level of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Mark believed he was in control, that he had the upper hand. But he had no idea who he was really up against. If he was as calculated as the private investigator suggested, then I needed to be just as ruthless. Emily barely spoke, keeping her distance as I moved through the house. I made phone calls, jotted down notes, and pieced together the final details of my plan. She didn't ask questions and I didn't offer explanations. She had already caused enough damage. Cleaning up this disaster was now my responsibility. The first call I made was to the private investigator. He picked up after the second ring. I need your help, I said without hesitation. Figured you might, he replied evenly. What's the plan? I want to set a trap, I said. Something that will force him to show his true colors. There was a pause before the investigator responded. That's risky. If Mark catches on, he won't hesitate to retaliate. I don't care, I said, my voice firm. I'm done playing it safe. Over the next few hours, we put together a strategy simple yet effective. I would play the role of the clueless husband pretending to extend an olive branch to Mark. Meanwhile, the investigator would work behind the scenes, gathering the final pieces of evidence we needed to expose him completely. By the time the plan was set, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Mark had spent all this time manipulating and deceiving, believing himself untouchable. But now the balance was shifting. As I sat down to draft the message I would send to him, Emily entered the room. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. Jason, I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't look up. It's too late for that, Emily. She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I know, but I want to make this right. Just tell me what I need to do. I hesitated for a brief moment, then met her gaze. If you really want to help, then stay out of my way. Let me handle this. She nodded again, her expression solemn. For the first time in weeks, I saw something in her eyes, genuine regret. But forgiveness? I wasn't there yet. Not even close. As I hit send on the message to Mark, a cold certainty settled over me. This wasn't about salvaging my marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming my life and making sure Mark paid for every single lie, every manipulation, and every ounce of pain he had inflicted. What I didn't realize was that the storm I was about to unleash would change everything. Mark's response came within the hour. His tone was smug, dismissive, exactly as I had anticipated. He spoke as if he had already won, as if I were nothing more than a desperate man grasping at straws. Jason, I appreciate you reaching out. I think it would be best if we cleared the air. Let me know when and where you'd like to meet. I studied his message, feeling my pulse steady. He truly believed he was still in control. I typed my reply, let's meet at the bar on 5th Avenue. Tonight at 8. Just you and me. What he didn't know was that the private investigator had already arranged for discreet surveillance at the bar. Every action, every word, and every subtle gesture from Mark would be documented. As the hours crawled by leading up to the meeting, a heavy silence filled the house. Emily lingered nearby, clearly wanting to say something, but I had nothing left to discuss. Her choices had already been made. As the clock struck 7:30, I grabbed my jacket and keys. Emily stood in the doorway, hesitation written across her face. Jason, please be careful, she murmured. I'll be fine, I replied, stepping past her and heading out. The bar was dimly lit, the low hum of conversation blending with the occasional clinking of glasses. At a secluded corner table, the investigator subtly adjusted his recording device, preparing for what was about to unfold. Toward the back, I spotted Mark already seated. A confident grin stretched across his face. As I approached, he extended a hand in greeting. Jason, good to see you, man. I ignored the gesture and sat down. Let's not waste time, I stated flatly. You've been lying to Emily, just like you've done to others before her. You think you're untouchable, but I know exactly what you are. Mark leaned back in his chair, his smirk unwavering. You're overreacting. Emily made her own decisions. Maybe you should ask yourself why she was looking for something more. I remained composed. And what about the others? The ones before her? For the first time, his confidence wavered, if only slightly. I have no idea what you're talking about, he said, though his tone wasn't as steady as before. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and opened a folder, turning the screen toward him. These women do. Images, financial transactions, and police reports filled the display. The evidence was undeniable. A flicker of unease passed through his eyes as he glanced around the bar, as if searching for a way out. His voice dropped lower. You should be careful, Jason. You're involving yourself in things you don't fully understand. I understand enough, I replied firmly. I also know that people like you thrive on deception. But it's over, Mark. The authorities already have everything. If I were you, I'd start preparing for what's coming. For a brief moment he simply sat there, silent. Then, instead of reacting with anger, he let out a low chuckle. I'll give you credit, you've got nerve. But you have no idea how deep this really goes. He stood, adjusting his jacket. This conversation is over. I watched him leave before speaking. Yeah, it is. I glanced toward the investigator, who gave me a small nod. Every word had been recorded. Now it was just a matter of time. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was the investigator. They got him, he informed me. Already? I asked, surprised. He got careless. His financial transactions raised some red flags. They arrested him at his apartment this morning. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of it all sink in. Mark was finally out of our lives. Emily, on the other hand, was struggling. She withdrew into herself, spending most of her time in the guest room, barely speaking. Eventually, one evening, she broke the silence. "Jason," she said softly, her voice filled with regret. "I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am." I studied her carefully before responding. "I appreciate that, Emily, but an apology doesn't change what happened." Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "I understand. I hope that someday you'll be able to move past this." "I already have," I answered simply. The following weeks were filled with legal proceedings and endless paperwork. Mark's arrest became public knowledge, and while Emily wasn't legally implicated, her involvement drew attention. Eventually, she chose to leave the city and start over elsewhere. One evening, I found myself back at the same bar where I had confronted Mark. As I took a slow sip of my drink, a rare feeling settled over me, peace. I wasn't consumed by anger or resentment. I had endured betrayal, manipulation, and deceit. But in the end, I had emerged stronger. Mark was no longer a threat. Emily was no longer my concern. And for the first time in a long time, my life was finally my own. That was all I needed.